So when you have something simple like a box and you're going to shade that box, all of us in the cases of our letter are going to have three sides. I know there's lots of parts to the letter, but ultimately there's going to be, a top, a right side, and a left side. Does that make sense? And when you look at that, you should be able to see three independent values. So on the box, you're seeing the right side being the light, the top being the medium value, and the left side being the darkest shadow. Do you guys all register those three different values?
Yeah.
Now that you know about them, can you kind of see them in the B? I realize the top sort of turns into the side, but this value is still, this value is still lighter than this value. Do you see when you look at the edge right here, you can tell that this one is the darker one? And this is the medium one. And this is the light. What's going on with the shadows in here? That's a cast shadow from the front part of the B. So you know my light source is coming from kind of way over here, kind of this way. So understanding that there are going to be more or less three different values at a minimum is quite important. I've drawn a value scale here, right here. And for some reason, I felt like my white shape needed to be much larger than my black at the bottom. But when you squint, do you see at least, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe even 7 different values? So the way I created value with this value scale is using my Prismacolor, not Prismacolor, using my Micron pen and working with hatching and cross hatching. So hatching, and the first value can just be white, I guess. But hatching is when you go one direction on the page repeatedly to create a tone. So do you see how the bottom portion of that value scale is just one step darker than the top? Then if I go over it again in a different direction, then it becomes cross hatching. Also, the density of lines matters. If I just did horizontal lines, but I did them very, very close together, they would yield a different result in terms of the value they created. Do you guys see that?
Yeah.
So it can be achieved with just hatching, potentially. So that's getting another step darker. Maybe I'll go this direction this time. For the very last value, I'm just going to make sure I've filled in every last bit of black. So hopefully I've been able to fairly easily create double the amount of values I'm going to need. For the darkest side of the box or the letter, I'm just choosing the box because I think it's easier for you guys to see. I'm imagining one of these values. Do you see those?
Yeah.
For the top, I think this value, or really there's a pretty big jump between this one and this one. So there might even be, I might even be able to make a value just a hair darker. You see that? That's feeling kind of right. And then for the lightest value, I would probably choose, this or this for that lightest value. So when I shade the box, another thing to take into account is the direction of your marks, that they can be really helpful or they can be really hurtful to, communicating the direction that the planes are going. So I always try to go parallel to the lines, the perspective lines that are already there. And I try to change direction so that the lines can't be confused for one another. Now, I don't think you guys can see the lines right now. I think the camera is too far away. So I'm filling this in and I want you to see the value differences, but then I'm going to zoom in and show you the actual mark making. When I squint, I really want to make sure that the dark side separates from the top. Do you see 3 distinctly different values there?
Yep.
And do you see how the direction of the line is helping the form and not hurting it? I want to kind of show you what hurting it would look like. So what if I shaded this way? I shaded this way. And this way. I'm still getting 3 different values, but that is not helping me with the form. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
This has much more integrity to it. So going to the actual letter, if I can. I'm going to turn on my other light now. I had it off so you guys could see the light source better. Actually, yeah, I guess I'll turn on. So it can be really helpful to have a model, have something in front of you that can give you, a sense of how the letter is working. So if you have a box, or if you have, those letters, or if you're out at Hobby Lobby this week and you just want to kind of cheat and photograph a letter that you find in there, all that would be fine. So I mentioned to you guys that the graphite can be somewhat problematic when you're, inking. Some people, I guess, don't have problems with that. I'm a little nervous about it. So I like to take some of the graphite out. I think I'm still going to be able to see the lines just fine. There's going to be enough left over there. Also, if you have trouble erasing the lines, what you can do is draw just to the side of that line. So you're not, directly in the graphite, but you're, still doing everything more or less correctly. So I'm just kind of erasing it. When I use a ruler, I press decently hard. So I can kind of guess that I'll still be able to find those lines. Maybe you want to take a picture of it before you do that. Okay, so I've erased what I think are kind of the critical lines, and I'm going to do a combination of hatching and line variation. I mentioned to you guys that having heavier lines in the foreground can be really helpful. So I'm going to try to represent the front with a little thicker line. And the way I do that is I draw, this way against the ruler, and then I kind of angle the pen the other way against the ruler, and it makes me just create a thicker mark. Some of this you will have to freehand, but be careful. When I have the opportunity to use the ruler, I do, just to keep it all looking clean and consistent. So here's my chance to do a thicker line in the foreground and a lighter line as I go in the background. It's not the background, as I go to the back of the form.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Can I use your M for one of my letters?
Use my M?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think you need to, if you want to do M, draw your own M. Or you mean like use the same angle and stuff?
Yeah, so I can
Yeah, you need
copy
to do
the way you
something
did it.
different. You need to internalize this enough that you can do your own version of it and understand it. So it needs to be at least a slight variation on what I've done. Little heavier lines now back in the front of the letter, the closest part to you. And at some point, I'm going to have to make a decision about what is going to be the light side and the shadow side, of the letter. With this one, it's not above or below the horizon line. So I'm going to have, other sides. Like I'm going to have the underside to this, and I'm going to be looking down on that. But mostly, I want to distinguish between the right and left side of the objects. This is where it would be really nice to have the physical letter in front of me. My hands have been quite shaky lately, so I really struggle to make these lines clean. But I think consistent is important too. So, um, if I'm going to use a ruler, I'm going to try to stick with a ruler for that part. If I'm doing freehand, I'm going to try to just do the very best I can with it. All right, so I've traced everything um, with the pen. I may have a little more erasing to do with the graphite. Now I need to decide about what will be the light side and what will be the shadow side. I think it makes sense for the front side of the letter to be the light side, although it doesn't matter what I choose. This kind of reminds me of an M, so I'm thinking I could look at this for a little bit of inspiration with how to shade, but this is really being lit from the opposite side than I want. I want to kind of do the reverse where this side is in light, these sides are in shadow. And then I'm noticing as these things curl under here, they seem to get a little bit darker. So I'm imagining this space under here being a little bit on the dark side. It seems kind of deep and dark back in here too. So I'll probably darken this a little more. And then if I flip it over, I see, I don't know, just kind of even or maybe a little extra dark here too as it turns. So let me just kind of see how that goes. For the front of the letter, I'm thinking I'm just going to do straight lines, straight vertical, but the other direction I could choose is to go back to the vanishing point, which would mean, well, I should probably do that for you guys because that's the more complicated choice. That would mean as I move down, the angle has to change of my mark making. So I'll start up here, I guess. And I just want to go for a light-ish value. So I'm gonna just do some light hatching. You don't have to use a ruler for this. This is just one possibility of how to do it. I'm a little worried about being messy with this, with the front. So I'm gonna play it safe. And do you see how I'm kind of lightly touching it? Like I'm not actually even getting a full line really, because I don't want to get too dark of a value. I think it's possible I'm already a little on the dark side for what I wanted.
So how are we gonna know what shadings to use for our letters? Like, are we gonna have
Uh,
to buy?
I would say use a box or something to help you imagine like what would the top and the side and the bottom of something look like. So I don't think everybody needs to go out and buy the letter. I think it's handy, but I don't think it should be a requirement for visualizing it. If you're really struggling to visualize it, you might benefit from something like that. But I think there may be enough things out there that you could Google that you could find some of that information too. So I don't think anybody's going to make the mistake after watching me do this of thinking this is a quick process. My arm is starting to cramp up. Not the one I'm drawing with, the one that's just laying flat on the ruler. And just for the sake of time and sanity, I'm going to skip down here and maybe I'll go back and finish it. But I want to get a little further along and show you guys just how the angles change throughout the letter. So here they're angling down. When I get to the horizon line, they'll be really almost perfectly horizontal.
If we're going to transfer it to the Bristol board, what's the point in coloring it all in on the regular sheet of paper?
I would say there's no point in coloring it in on the regular sheet of paper, but I'm not going to transfer it to the Bristol board just to do my demonstration.
Oh, okay, I was confused.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't, I think you guys don't need to watch me do that. I think you know how to transfer it. And I think some people aren't going to be able to transfer it because it's not going to be the right size. So I think most of you are just going to be drawing it again on the Bristol because you're going to need it to be a little smaller or a little bigger. Yeah.
And we're only supposed to use the pen to color it in?
Correct.
Okay.
I don't like moving the ruler up each time. Do you see how I'm doing that? Because I can't see how far I am from the last line. So I have no sense of whether I'm evenly spacing or, unevenly spacing my lines. So I think working my way down was the better option. So I'm not against finishing that part, but I'd like to move on to doing some other parts as well, just so you can see the curves and the angles. So this side is going to be, we agreed, darker, and I think I'm going to use a vertical line to do that. I don't want to go all the way black. I want to leave myself room to darken the value more if need be, but I am going to go dark enough that I see a significant change from one side to the other. So if you squint and you cannot see a value change right at the edges, you probably haven't gone dark enough. Now, did we say the underside was going to be darker or lighter? I think we said a little darker, right?
Yeah.
If you guys have different sized micron pens at home, you could certainly use a little larger one for some of these areas. So again, you need to be able to squint and see a value change from the one side to the other. So you'll have to go, as dark as you need to go to represent that. As the letter curves, I try to imagine these lines curving the same way. I'm trying to keep it neat, but I'm also not trying to spend 15 hours doing this. So I'm sort of trying to strike a balance there. When I can, I try to rely on the vanishing point a little bit for help. If you're nervous about not being able to do this neat enough, I would tape it off. I'd tape off the edges so you can, maybe work a little quicker without being afraid of going past the edge. I think by now you guys probably know what kind of people you are, if you're somebody who needs that or not. I'm probably somebody who would benefit from it. I think I'm going to make the darkest part of this shadow where the letter disappears behind the other side.
You make it look like it's so easy.
What'd you say?
You make it look like it's so easy.
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy. I've done a lot of drawing, so I know what I'm looking for. And that's why I think having like a reference photo, finding something with shading on it, a box or a letter, like it's not that hard to find. I mean, I ordered these on eBay, and I'm not suggesting you guys order them. It took a while for them to get here. But I mean, I'd be happy to show you your letter if I have it. But I think you can also look online and just find these and find pictures of them.
But what's neat is that the pen is making your M look like it's a sketch almost, which is neat, I think.
Yeah, the mark making is something I really like. I like the way it looks to see some of the detail or see some of the. Go ahead.
And using the roller is such a good idea. Like, I wouldn't have thought of using that.
Yeah, it can get dirty, especially if we're not using the marker, but like, there's black on the edge of the ruler. So you do have to be careful when you move it around on the paper that you're not, messing up the paper. So I would be kind of wiping it off and cleaning it, preferably not on your own skin, maybe like a paper towel. But I think that can be a good thing for, it's definitely worth using. Now, when I've got some very strong values, when I've got some very strong mark making in place, I can sort of, sketch in a little more value lightly and not have to worry that if one line gets out of place or is the wrong angle, it's going to throw this whole thing off. Do you see how I'm sort of using different angles now to build up that value? That's just fine. In here, I'm imagining this like a deep dark, but I don't really know. Oh, because the light's coming from this way. No, I don't think it would be a deep dark. I think it would be like I don't know. I might just might leave that light. I'm gonna leave that totally light, I think. I might put like a mark or two, but I don't really want to overdo that because I've still got to shade, this. Sorry. Interesting. You know what I don't see? I don't see a value change from here to here. I wish I would have filled that in more first because I think it's going to look the same as that. And I'm worried actually that when I do it over here, it's also going to look the same. So I may have to sort of darken this even more to make it stand out. That's unfortunate. I should have finished the front of it and not gotten lazy. So I don't necessarily have to darken the whole thing, but I need to get the edge at least to appear a little darker. I don't know how many of you are taking a drawing class or have learned about chiaroscuro, but it has to do with, you know, right where edges meet, one will get darker and one will get lighter. So do you guys start to see a little more of a value change now?
Yeah.
So some of this can't be pre-planned. You kind of have to respond to what you're doing. But I do think that was necessary to show that change. And if you guys remember, I said you get extra credit for doing the cast shadow. So you don't have to do it, but there is a fairly elaborate demonstration on how to do that if you would like to give it a shot. So light is coming from this way. I think I just made my light side a little too light. I'm sorry, a little too dark. And so it's sort of making everything else a little harder for me. I think when I fill this in right here, I'm going to try to space the lines out a little bit more, like let it get just a little dark, or I'm sorry, a little lighter in the middle. Because I made a few guide marks with the angles, I'm kind of able to jump around and know what the angles are going to be. So, you know, that could be a faster way for you to work too, is do you see how I've like marked these angles in at different points? That could make it easier if you do want to freehand it to sort of work between those marks. This is where it would really probably have been nice to tape off the edge so I'm not drawing off the edge. I'm imagining this in here being quite dark.
Is the ink going to smear more on the Bristol board than like on regular paper?
No. The Bristol board is well made for ink. I think I'm going to really darken under here. And I just have to think that this side is going to be lighter than this side. You know, the other side that we can't see back in there is probably lighter than this side will be because the light is coming from this direction. But the light will be bouncing off of things. There might be light coming from above, whereas here, this is more like a cave. So I'm going to make sure that this is a little lighter than this winds up being. So now I'm at the stage where these look, you know, pretty similar, although actually the inside of this still looks like the lighter side. I want to make sure that these two planes stay separate, the dark side here and this side. So I'm not going to over darken that. Now I'm tempted to do lines going this direction, but that's going to mimic the shape of the M. So I really want to be careful not to do that and probably come out, although it's not as easy, come out from the vanishing point instead. at some point I may need some line that goes at an angle just to help clean up the edge that I'm trying to create, you know, sharpen up the edge. So the final thing is this one. And I'm honestly struggling with what to do with it. I think I'm going to try leaving it a value like the lightest part of the front of the M. And you know, I said that the front side of the letter was going to be the light side, but maybe I need to think of the top as being the light side. Um, that's possible, right? It's possible the light is coming from the top, and then this is the medium, and this is the dark. And I think I just went too dark.
So to do a lighter shade, would you say to press lighter and leave more space between the lines?
Yes. Both of those things. And to do darker, you're going to do a lot more directions. So it could be about making the lines closer, but it could also be about just going over it in multiple different directions.
That looks really neat.
Thanks. And I think, and thank goodness I made the lines this different directions, because this really looks the same, you know, and I'm questioning if I should try to make that a little darker. But if it's the light side, you know, if the top is the light side, maybe I really, if anything, would need to make like this a little darker as it gets close to it. You know, the first time I shade letters, I would rather it wasn't my final project. Are you guys kind of getting that from watching me? Might have been nice to know what I was doing before I started this. So if you do a little, you know, planning sketch, or let's say you have a photocopier and you photocopy this and try shading it a couple different ways before you actually start on the final piece, I think that would be pretty smart. I'm definitely wishing I had a little more of a plan. I thought I had a plan, and I'm pretty good at, you know, making things look right. So you know, I don't think I'm unskilled at this. I think it's just would have been smarter. And I am just darkening the edge right here a little bit. I think that was the right call. You know, you don't ever want something to look like it has a halo around it, but if you can sort of make a little bit of a transition where it feels natural. All right, so I think I could keep tinkering around with this, but I think this gives you a pretty good idea of how to approach the shading. Would you agree?
Yeah, it looks really cool. Like, I'm looking forward to trying it out myself.
Oh, good. And you know, I'm going to do a little erasing now, but I am not going to erase anywhere close to my actual ink because it's still drying. So you definitely don't want to be rubbing your hand over the ink and resting on it. You could even get a separate, like, have you guys heard of people doing like a, you know, like a paper to just like rest their hand on? That can be a really good idea. But I wouldn't even slide the paper around with your hand on it. I would try to move it and just rest your hand on it so you don't, you know, smear or smudge anything. So how are you guys feeling about doing this?
I guess a little bit afraid.
How would you guys feel about extending the due date for this? We are not going to keep working on it in class. We've got to move on to another project, but would you guys like to have another week to sort of work on this?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Okay. So, so I would still like you to work on this as if it's due for Tuesday. And I'd still like to look at these Tuesday, even if it's just for a few minutes. You know, I'd like to give you guys time to give you some feedback on the compositions and the shading and some things like that. So, you know, maybe you make photocopies and you practice on the photocopies. And you think about composition at that point too. And I think that the grid portrait, it's going to be like, it's usually a little bit of a rough start. Like some people might not have the right photo. Some people need to go back and watch the videos. So I think that we can kind of fill in, like we'll keep with our schedule of starting the grid portrait, and you will need to do that. So this weekend really is your main time to finish this project. But, you know, you could definitely, I think, with another week, feel a little more comfortable with finishing it. So let's change the due date to, what would that be? Can't even find my mouse. So it's supposed to be due